Well, welcome, Viva El Birdos. This is JP Hill over at the side, or you can just call me Jason Hill, whatever you want. JP Hill _cards on Twitter. And we are here again with the VEB Podcast. This time, we have one of our own, Big Jawn Mize, our minor league commenter and guru, is here with us to talk a little bit about the MLB Draft. And just a little precursor warning. I know nothing about what I'm talking about. So don't pay any attention to my opinions, but pay a lot of attention to Big John's because he really does. And so I'm coming in this with the draft list and a little bit of research behind that, but no real knowledge. Just here to ask the questions that you might be thinking and get to the bottom of what is this 2022 left-hand heavy Cardinals draft. How you doing, Big John?
I'm doing well, JP. How are you, man?
Doing great. Good to have you. Let's just jump right in, not waste any time. Are you a lefty, and were you drafted by the Cardinals?
No, I'm a righty, but I was rumored to be drafted by the Cardinals, and they were going to convert me to a lefty. So
yeah, I'm a little ambidextrous. I might start working on that slider. If I can get that drop down left-handed slider, I think I've got a future at age 43. I think I got a chance to make it. So. But let's start with the first round pick out of Oregon State. This is how we're going to pronounce the name. If it's wrong, Cooper, you can correct us at some point. Cooper Hjerpe. And if you know how it's spelled, the jokes write themselves, but we'll stick with Hjerpe for now. And I know, Big John, you had some thoughts on online.
Yeah.
Interesting takes. So go, man.
Yeah.
Tell us about this guy.
So I knew as soon as I wrote something flippant about a draft prospect and posted it that the Cardinals would absolutely pick that guy.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, they were waiting for that.
Yeah. And I would have to go, oh no, I have to justify what I was saying. So personally, I think that if we look at Major League pitching right now, there's a couple different kind of schools of thought about how pitchers are being developed. And I don't want to, when I say this, I don't want to say, hey, there's this Venn diagram with two circles and they're separated. There's some overlap here.
Yeah, right.
But you look at, when you scout kids, you are looking at fastball, usually number one. The number one thing you're looking for is a fastball. You need to get a fastball usage is the most important thing in the league. You want to get a fastball that you can throw in the zone. Like you had Thomas on a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about trust your stuff. Well, you need something you can trust and get into the zone and really get strikes. And so when you're scouting kids, I usually like to think about fastball first. And what happens with some of these kids is that I like to see, I wrote it out there, it's 93 plus arm side run or some form of horizontal movement on it.
Yeah.
And you see some of these kids and they're going to throw a fastball and it's going to be arm side run on the arm side of the plate. They can get a lot of movement on it. They get a lot of velocity on it, but they can only do that to a certain part of the zone, and if they try to go crossbody or to the glove side of the plate, it starts to straighten out on them, or it starts to straighten out, or it starts to, it loses a lot of its life. And so what ends up happening, I think, in pitching right now, we're seeing some of these guys who are being developed to use that pitch. So say if we had a fastball arm side run, they're just going to throw the fastball to the outside of the plate, and that's the only place they're going to locate it. And then they're going to be taught a cutter, and that's going to get them to the glove side of the plate. And then they're going to be taught a slider, and that'll get them into the sort of lower glove side part of the plate, and they might be able to throw a change up, lower arm side quadrant.
Yeah.
We hear about this all the time. We hear about guys who are able to throw fastballs at the top of the zone, and the fastball's got a lot of life, and it's a plus fastball at that point. But the way I look at it is that you see fastballs, and sometimes they're only plus to a certain location, and they kind of die or they lose some of their life as they go to other pitchers try to throw them to different locations. And so looking at Hjerpe, he's kind of the other train of thought here, and that you have guys with maybe less repertoire, maybe throwing 3 pitches, and then those guys need to have that pitch have life all over the zone, right? There are 3 pitches. They need to at least have, say a fastball, slider, change. They need to be able to kind of locate those pitches generally all over the zone. I'd say maybe the changeup you can get away with being able to just locate an arm side. But because you have such a limited repertoire, you have to be able to kind of pinpoint what you're doing, get movement all over the zone, fill the zone with strikes. So that's the kind of pitcher Jerpy kind of strikes me as, and the sort of development path that he's going to be on is really trying to fill up that zone with strikes with his fastball and slider especially, and trying to, because he's such an uncomfortable at bat, he's going to have to get a ton of movement on those pitches going into the zone. And if that doesn't work, it's going to be, because of the arm slot and everything, it's going to be very hard for him to develop, say, a cutter that acts like a cutter, or something that moves a little bit differently. It's kind of he's locked. I think personally he's locked into sort of fastball, slider, changeup kind of situation. So if you look at it, I think it's a really interesting experiment almost. This is like the biggest roll of the dice you can come up with, but he may not work out, and that might be fine. Because if you go down the rest of the draft, the Cardinals have definitely drafted toolkits where they can make adjustments and on the fly. So
right,
I'm really interested to see how this goes.
Yeah. So do you think, is it his inability, or presumed, maybe not inability, unlikelihood of being able to develop something like a cutter, is because of that low arm slot, that almost sidearm?
Yeah, well, even if you look at his slider, it kind of comes out of the hand a little bit odd. It's not it kind of hops out of his hand a little bit. So that's coming off the top of from that angle, it's coming off the top of his fingers, and it's getting a lot of backspin and a lot of side, because I guess the release point's so extended, he's getting a lot of a cross body action on it.
Yeah,
so
that's one of the things I read about him is that I keep going. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No. So he's getting a ton of extension. He's getting a ton of cross-body action just from the release point. And then he's throwing it off the sort of top of his Finger. So it's getting a lot of I would say almost curveball action on it. So he's getting a lot of vertical movement. And if you look at the sort of TrackMan stats, it's a lot of vertical movement above average. And it's also a lot of horizontal movement above average for that pitch, if you quote unquote call it a slider. And from that arm angle, slider is just really describing how it's released from the hand, and it's just coming off the fingers. It's kind of snapping off the inside of the pointer finger, and to call it a slider, that's probably the correct description, but it's a little bit of a different beast than what you see from a typical slider. And
should we just start calling these things breaking pitches, by the way? I mean,
yeah, and I'm really curious if you look at someone like Jordan Hicks and Sandy Alcantara, what that two-seamer that's coming off the sort of outside of their index or middle finger is, because if you watch those guys, they get that it's a two-seamer and it's got a lot of fade and cut on it going to their arm side. And oh man, Alcantara is throwing that fastball like that, and it's just getting a couple feet of arm side run at it now. So I'm not even sure what we call that anymore, because it's evolved beyond what it used to be. So
yeah, that's a whole nother conversation at some point about these.
Yeah, maybe sometime we'll talk about that.
Right. Because it just I watch these guys, I'm like, that's not a slider, and then Statcast will listen to slider, and then it's like, I don't know, it's a breaking pitch, or it's in a fastball grouping,
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. We're looking at fastball groupings, and you're looking at breaking pitch groupings, and these are they are what they are. I mean, and you have the hybrids like cutters, and what are you going to do with that pitch as well? So
yeah. I've got a question about this, because with that sidearm delivery, it used to be that we talked a lot of, and this is very generalization. Now I understand that, and I think you will. that we used to talk about downward plane on your fastballs, right? That's one of the things that they wanted. And I remember it was a discussion, I can't remember who it was, but the whole tall and fall or the drop and drive sort of thing. And like Shelby Miller or something was more of a drop and drive guy. Anyway, going back to, the conversations 10 years ago. Is that still a thing? Have the Cardinals just abandoned that, or is this just pure chance they pick guys that have a whole lot of downward plane?
I think so I think it's just a strategy, because you'll see pitchers that still have a lot of downward plane, and those are acting in a sort of sinker ball kind of or trying to get a sort of sinker ball action.
Okay, good point. Really good point. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you're going to get some on top of some balls hit on top of the ball, and grounders out of that plane. I think though, with the spin data that we've developed over the last 10 years, where you get like a fastball up in the zone with a high spin rate, people have realized, okay, well, maybe that downward plane, getting whiffs up in the zone is just as good as getting a ground ball or weak contact low in the zone. And so I'm not sure that the worry about getting a downward plane or throwing at the top of the zone is actually it's not something that I actually worry about it at that level. So
yeah. They've talked about, and I think this is just more, again, sort of a generalized question for you. I think I know what you're going to say, but they talk about Connor Jerpy being a fast mover, and I think I read somewhere or heard online someone talking about, he could be up pitching for the Cardinals by the end of the year, which is ridiculous.
Really.
Yeah, but what makes him a fast mover? And if you had to put an estimated date or timeline on him, what would you expect to see? Do you think he's going to throw this year? And how far do you think you could make it next year if things go as hoped for him?
No, I don't think he's going to make it this year. I think what's going to happen, I mean, again, if you look at college pitchers, the year-over-year work increases or inning increases usually max them out at having maybe 20 or 30 more innings in them at the end of the pro season.
He had a pretty big workload, didn't he, this year?
Yeah, he was like over 100 innings too.
Yeah,
so,
right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure exactly where he was last year, but I assume that was pretty close to the max that he should be if you consider some of the 130% year-to-year increase kind of numbers. So that's probably close to where he should have been for that year. I assume he's going to go to complex. He's going to get an opportunity to throw, do a lot of bullpen sessions. I guess that's kind of what I meant by will we see him? Will he just be at the complex, or do you think they'll push him to to Palm Beach or Peoria or something like that? Yeah, I think he's probably just going to be at complex. I think he's got enough mileage on his arm. The team's been usually kind of conservative about promoting not promoting, but placing college arms into the draft, into the system. Did we? I don't think we didn't see McGreevy last year in the system. If he did, he was only like a start or two, and I think that might be the way they'll look at it.
Yeah, I think he might be
complex.
Yeah, I think I'm going to check that. Keep going. Yeah,
I think that he'll probably go to complex, pitch. Just a lot of bullpen sessions, maybe a couple games there, and then he'll probably get a start or two at the end of the season. And that's probably what we'll see from him. And then
McGreevy 5 starts. Doesn't list the level here at A-ball last year. 6 innings. 6 innings. So almost nothing.
Yeah, almost nothing. Yeah, so McGreevy was probably operating in sort of a opener fashion at that point. Getting 1 to 2 innings and then going forward. So, I think next year, I don't know exactly what the plan would be for him. I think it's going to be it's always performance based.
Yeah,
I mean, if you perform, you get promoted. So it's going to be interesting. I think one of the big keys for him is if you look at a pitcher that's unique like that, how much does that uniqueness wear off once pro hitters see him a few times? So I would really like to see him go to probably high A. So go to Peoria, have an opportunity to throw a couple times through the league. So that guys get a couple looks at him. And I'm really curious to see what that second time through the league, what it looks like for him. Because when you think about hitting college, I mean, in conference, those kids probably saw him. If you're a hitter, you probably saw him in a conference, a home and away. You probably saw him 6 to 8 times. And so that's super unique.
Yeah.
You're not going to see anyone like that in college. If you look at him in a minor league, in out of conference, they're only going to see this kid like 3 times, and 3 at bats total. So if you look at him going through minor league baseball, you're going to be looking at a guy you're going to get to see him maybe 2-3 starts, and then professional hitters may start to be able to pick up on it. I'm not sure. It's just an experiment, and it's a real roll of the dice by the team. I'm really interested in see how this turns out. So
yeah, just to kind of finish that, just looking here at McGreevy, who I'm not going to say is a comp for Jerpy or anything, but college pitcher.
No one is.
Yeah, right, exactly. College pitcher, same kind of situation in one sense. Yeah, he went to A+ to start the year, 8 starts, 45 innings. So yeah, probably several teams saw him at least twice. He might have seen everyone once. Performed well, and now he's off to AAA, 10 starts there, 52 innings. So, and performances, he's kind of hit a wall there at AA. Not in a bad sense, but that's a hefty challenge to go to AA. You're basically your first.
Yeah, it's a huge
challenge.
High A to AA is a huge leap for these guys.
Yeah, some people are going to look at McGreevy's stats and be disappointed in him, and that's just not the right take, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, this is actually an interesting conversation overall. If you look at what the Cardinals are doing, they're using, and some teams do this well and some teams don't. They're using like an analytical model to kind of filter out who they need to look at.
Yeah.
And one of the key inputs on those analytical models usually is age. And especially when you look at minor leaguers as they're coming up, that age number relative to their competition is huge. And in college, it's maybe a little less, but man, if you see freshmen perform against juniors, that's still significant. And if you see someone like Cam Collier, who went to the Cape, youngest player to ever play at the Cape, and he turned into a bit of a slap hitter. I think he had like a 500 on base percentage at the Cape. He was slugging like 260 or something. It was absurd. But the guy, he's playing against guys 3-4 years older than him, 20, 21, 22, and it's impressive. I actually am really impressed with that type of performance there, especially with wood bats, and especially in that type of environment. So when you think of looking at kids as they move, age relative to their competition is a huge thing.
Yeah. Let's move on then to the second pick. Let's try to move through these lefties pretty fast so we can get on with the some of the offensive players. But you've got Bryson Motz, and then you've got Pete Hansen. Sort of similar in one regard. What are your thoughts on those guys?
So Bryson Motz really fits the model. It's almost like watching, I don't want to say watching a left-handed McGreevy, but fits that sort of model the team's been looking for. Fastball that they think they can improve, solid breaking ball. And then if you read the scouting reports on him, I think there's a lot of people that are inconsistent about what they think of his changeup. But I thought watching the video of him, he flashed some really, really devastating changeups out there. Really mic drops, walk off the mound type guy with some of those. And so, I was really intrigued. I think this is exactly the type of player the Cards like to draft and develop. I bet he's going to be on the Graphico McGreevy kind of track coming up. So it's just one of those guys. I bet they get in the complex, they might be able to increase his velocity by a tick or two. Looks really athletic. Absolutely. I was thrilled to see that pick when it came up. So
now if I'm remembering right, he pitched mostly in relief, which isn't that
I thought he did as a freshman.
Was that it?
I think his strikeout numbers this year.
Okay. I'm sorry. It does say looking at this report, it does say 2021. It doesn't say that he moved to the rotation in 22, but that should be in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. Okay. So no concern about him being a starter.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a typical move. You'll see a lot of freshmen that come into college and they're going to throw as closer or relievers, and then either work into back of the weekend type guys, and then be your Friday night starter.
Yeah.
So that's not an atypical thing. So a lot of times, you'll see these college pitchers that are sophomores, and they're going to be back of the weekend starters, like their Saturday starter. And they will have moved from being the closer the previous year or throwing some relief the previous year.
Yeah.
And that'll be their first step up in innings. And sometimes you have those guys and they're draft eligible. So
yeah. You mentioned that the Cardinals can think they might be able to improve his velocity. This is something that they've done. I don't think the Cardinals are unique in this, really. We just have a couple of high profile examples of that. If he's sitting low 90s, 91 to 94, somewhere in that range right now, what would be a realistic, because I've seen some debate about this with Jerpy too, what would be a realistic landing point where he would sit in 2 or 3 years when he actually makes like a major league debut? 1 mile per hour extra 2, or what do you think? I think the goal for most teams is to get 93, get people to set around 93 average. And that with movement, that's a great fastball in the league. It's not I shouldn't say it's a great fastball, but that's a really serviceable fastball in the league. Yeah.
And if you can move it and kind of command it to where you want on the plate, you're going to be fine. So, I saw on video, he can set around 94. So I think that getting him to set in that range at 94 and then be able to top out at like 96, 97 is probably a reasonable expectation from the team. So,
okay. Yeah, some of these reports, you just never know like what the information actually is, what game they looked at. It just all kinds of different data out there that you were just sort of stuck with unless you really want to dig into the video, like you have.
Yeah, and I try to get into this in the sort of high school hitting write up I did. Scouting's a lot about sample size. It's entirely how many times can you actually get there, and how many examples of a kid at the plate can you get? It's really difficult. I mean, even if a kid's doing the perfect game circuit and they're getting every at bat from that kid, that's 80 at bats, 100 at bats in a year. That's all you get. I mean, because that circuit's running 8 weeks or so, 8 to 12 weeks, maybe at the end of the high school baseball season into about now. So even maybe 8 weeks total. And those kids are going to play like 20 to 30 games in that circuit. And it's going to be really difficult to get good information on these kids just from the sample size that they're going to present. So, and it's a problem in scouting. It's always been a problem in scouting. It's the reason most people will tell you pitching's easier to scout too. Like you can go to a game and you'll get 100 pitches. And you can actually see 100 pitches.
Yeah, you might get 4 swings from a hitter.
You might get 4 swings from a hitter. And that guy goes out in the field. He might just sit out there all day, not have anything happen. And on the site we've talked about it. It's like, how do you scout defense? Well, defense is really easy to scout if you see the guy every day and you get a bunch of chances to watch him. Easy to scout. It's easy to tell what the good defenders are on the field. But if you only get to see the guy make like one play and you're out there, you have no idea. So.
So Pete Hansen, the third lefty in a row, another starter prospect with low to mid 90s velocity.
Low 90s,
and an arm slot. Here we are again. So
and arm slot and low 90s, and so Hansen, Jonathan Cannon was still on the board. I think the Sox took him a couple picks later. I was kind of more like, oh man, maybe they'll pick one that I like, and they'll pick Cannon. And because I thought Cannon kind of fit the mold too. So I was really kind of a little bit disappointed to see the pick. This was the pick. The ERP pick. I'm like, okay, this is a gamble. It's a really interesting gamble. I'm willing to accept it. Motz straight up love the pick. It's going to be great. I think he has a really good chance of succeeding. This pick, this is going to be some work. I think he's going to need some work because, from what I could tell, his fastball doesn't get a ton of movement on it. And so I'm not sure he's got that first pitch fastball for strike one kind of scenario. And that's what concerns me. I don't think he's got the fastball currently there, but here's the thing. Maybe the team feels like they can improve that because physically he looks like he should throw harder. He's tall, pretty well built. So he looks like a good athlete. So I think the team like drafted him as sort of the toolbox and said, okay, this guy's going to be a little bit of a development project and he might take a little longer, but hey, we probably can add a tick or two to the fastball, a couple ticks to the fastball. Hopefully we can get it to move a little bit better. But he has great command. He throws the curveball pretty well into the zone. It just seems like it's a little bit more of a project there than some of the other picks. Because we're going to talk the Ranjic kid. I think that's how you pronounce his name, from UCLA. And that guy's a full kind of toolkit too. That already throws like 93, 94 and has all the same skill, or well, similar skills, good curveball. Maybe not the command, but yeah. And they got him in the 6th round. So
yeah, how do you say that? Ramshick?
Yeah, Ranjic or I'm not sure.
Yeah, out of UCLA. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at him, again, he's like this kind of toolkit, and you're like, oh yeah, he's already got a good fastball, and he throws a really nice curveball. And he's from a pretty standard arm slot that they can work with. So if he needs to, he can develop additional pitches. So I think it's really interesting. That's a really great pick for the team because it fits kind of into the mold of their development department. So and this is a good point that people need to think about, is that the development department, there's 2 different departments in a major league org. You got a scouting department and a development department. Now there's a ton of feedback loop between those 2 departments.
Yeah.
But one's you're not scouting and drafting the guy that you think, you're not drafting the best player available, basically. You're drafting the best player available that you think your team can develop. You might look at the Brewers and say, oh, are the Red Sox can't develop pitching. I don't know why, but man, they do a good job developing hitters. So when they draft, should they be drafting pitching, or what type of pitching should they be drafting? You might want to be a more polished guy that's closer to the show, and then you're willing to take more bets on the tools hitting wise. The Brewers are the exact opposite. They do such a great job at developing pitching, and I don't think they can develop a hitter with a lick. And I never can figure out. I never can figure out. And no doubt, developing hitting is hard, but it's very. But you would think they would luck out and get someone at some point in the draft that they could develop. And then you have someone like the Cardinals who do a good job at kind of developing across the board, and because of where they pick, they're developing regulars. They're not really developing stars right now, but it looks like they lucked out and really hit a home run in that 2020 draft. So and they're going to get a couple stars out of that group. And so, yeah, it's really important to think about this in terms of not just amateur scouting, not terms of when you write a prospect list, you're usually thinking of the best athlete available at that point. But in terms of not just that, but also development, like, can I draft this guy and then can I develop him? And they're hand in hand. There's a huge feedback loop going on there. They get to the end of development and you have more information. Once you get to the end of development, you got to think of it sort of like a project where you go back to the beginning of it. Hey, what did we draft? Did we do a good job? You have to ask all these questions, lesson learned on those kids as they go through the system. So
that was actually the kind of like the question that I asked Mo at this Blogger Day thing at the Q&A, was that there seems like there's quite a bit of I don't know if success, I guess probably the best word right now, between their draft department and their development. Like they've been able to develop the types of players they've drafted. And they're not getting stars necessarily until we'll see about see about Wynn and Walker and maybe Gorman and Carlson to some extent, maybe even Flaherty. But I mean, by and large, they're not getting huge stars. They're just getting a lot of production out of sort of mid-range talents, which is really impressive. I mean, that's the engine that makes a team go and win year by year. When you can pull out Alan Craigs and Matt Carpenter. Well, Carpenter was going to be a team Hall of Famer, but sort of Donovan. Yeah, I mean, how critical?
Where do you get Donovans?
Yeah, no yeah. I mean, you can win with Brendan Donovans and Harrison Bader, so that's huge.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a good point when we talk about someone like Scott, where I guess he was 5th round, was he? Yeah, 5th round.
I can check. Yeah, the outfielder. Yeah.
I kind of think he looks a little bit like a Bader replacement in a way. And we've had success developing that type of player. He got a little bit of a damage on contact type swing. He plays center field, runs like the wind, plays center field well. Yeah, it's that type of player. And they've been able to develop those guys through pretty consistently. So, and they had organizational history of doing it. So I think that was a solid pick too.
So the 3 hitters, they're kind of at the top of the close to the between rounds 1 and 10. You've got Victor Scott, left-handed hitting outfielder, almost certain. Then you've got, I had trouble saying this one because you just read these names, I don't even know how they're said. Alex Iadiscerna.
Yeah, I don't have much information on him. I haven't been able to find too much and dig into it. So
yeah, but another lefty outfielder. It's interesting to me that they went so lefty heavy, and I need to kind of confirm, make sure he's a lefty. It doesn't say here on this one site that I'm looking at, but with both their early round, sort of mid-round hitters and pitchers, so lefty heavy. And then Jimmy Crooks is an interesting one. Yeah.
I was a huge fan of that pick as well. I think that kid, his swing is, man, he's got a solid swing. I think that he looks the part of a future power hitting kind of catcher type. He moves well behind the plate. He's got a great build for it. I saw a few throws, some snap times and stuff. He looks pretty quick, like he's going to stick back there and have a reasonable chance of containing the running game. So I was a huge fan of that pick. His swing is just very, very good. And he does, I mean, when I wrote up the what I looked for in scouting, and I was like, okay, I want to see, and this comes back from when I was doing advanced scouting in college. I want to see how kids handle inside velocity. Can you turn on a fastball that's in on your hands or coming in on your hands? And then I want to see how kids handle breaking pitches. And Crooks does both of them. He can handle inside velocity, looks really good, gets his hands nice and tight to his body, gets a lot of rotation out of his hips, up and through his torso. Doesn't rely on extension, doesn't hit the ball 2 feet out in front of the plate, hits it really close to the plate. And then he also appears to do damage on breaking pitches. Like that, statistically, he looks like he was doing a lot of damage on breaking pitches. So you can he looks like a complete hitter that will stick at catcher, and he's left-handed. So if you think about where catching I personally think catching's going, is that you're going to want to. There's so few all-star level seasons in a catcher, right? You've got a couple of them, but they kind of wear down pretty quick. That you really want to kind of just not worry about the ceiling at catching, but raise the floor of your catching position. And you want to have guys that can do 60-40 splits, and you want to have platoon situations there where you might not be a perfect platoon split, but you have a lefty, he's going to face, get to 60% of the games and face almost every righty, and you might have a righty that gets the 40% of the games but has to hit against a few right-handers too, and so Cross is having a left-handed hitting catcher. Cross is going to be very important if that type of scenario comes about.
Anyone else that you wanted to make mention of? I think we've talked about everyone that we had mentioned, but anything else that stands out about the rest of the draft at all, or is that we should go?
That was the big ones. I really wanted to talk. I really liked Cross. I really liked this Scott pick too. Who else was I thinking on this list? I think the Lindquist pick's kind of interesting. He looks like he might be a decent reliever coming out. He's got that really high arm slot. And I was trying to think of the Cardinal prospect that was drafted in the Lunan area that had that. But he looks a little funkier. It was a kid out of Rice, and I can't think of his name right now. But he has a fastball changeup kind of arsenal that looks pretty interesting. But yeah, that's kind of the main list that I was thinking of. But again, I like the Max Rajic pick. I like the Motz pick quite a bit. I think the Herpy pick is or Jerpies. Yeah, it slips out, so right? Times. You can't help yourself. The Jerpies
so many times. I really wish Mike Shannon was around still. Whenever that makes teenagers, that would be just a dream come true.
Yeah. So yeah, no, the Jerpy pick is it kind of a crapshoot, roll of the dice. Maybe the team doesn't see it that way. That's okay.
It's interesting. I'll give them that.
It's interesting. It's going to give us lots of things to talk about.
Yeah, lots of content. I'm all about content.
I know. It's going to be a well of information out there, right?
Yeah. So if without digging too deep, but list the picks that we talked about and where they are. Overall, you don't have to put a letter grade, but just sort of a gut vibe feel. How'd they do this year?
Well, I think the overall draft was down. Like when I went through the exercise of actually kind of like rating all these guys or trying to write a list of guys I kind of liked, I was noticing, man, high school pitching is injured. Tons of college pitching injured. There was when I went through it, I didn't think there was really a first round pick in the college pitchers this year. I was really surprised to see Horton go as high as he did, and I was really surprised to see Hughes to go as high as he did. And Rocker was just a shock at 3. I think there might have been some agent play there.
Yeah, I would guess that potentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But going through this, and then if you looked after you got through the top like 5 high school hitters, it was kind of a big donut hole this year too. And then you got some project, high ceiling, high risk kids that you could have picked up in the 3rd round, 2nd round, stuff like that if you're willing to do it. And then college hitting, I think that was just kind of a nice even but kind of down but even talent distribution across it. So that was a place to go mining for prospects. So when I look at the Cardinals draft, I think it kind of reflects this problem, some of the problems we were having with the draft overall, and that we just had a down year for top talent in some of these categories. And so they just kind of went mining with their analytical model and came out with a handful of like really interesting picks. And I wouldn't grade it, but given the overall talent that was available, this is going to be a really solid draft. I think you're going to see a couple of regulars come out of it. I totally expect it that a couple of regulars come out of it because the Cardinals do that. They just produce 2 to 3 regulars out of every draft, a couple, and that's what they're going to do. And I think this is not going to be any different this year. It might be 2 regulars versus like 3 or 4 that are going to come up, but I think they're going to be fine. So,
well, hey, Big John, that was awesome. Appreciate your insight and the information.
Yeah.
And
I was a little nervous to talk to you there.
I'm very scary, very frightening person.
Yeah, I know. We'll have to do this again sometime though.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got all kinds of things. I mean, we could talk. I'd love to do a primer, maybe in the off season about, some of the topics we talked about even before we came on about tunneling and spin rate and arm side and all those things. I mean, just so I can learn too. And I think, the site can kind of learn with me as we, talking about.
Yeah, totally. I'd be willing to talk a lot about that. I'd be willing to talk a lot about some of my history in baseball, because I think a lot of the questions that we were working on when I was in the game really ended up being answered by StatCast, and what happens next is like a really interesting conversation beyond StatCast or TrackMan. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation out there too.
Yeah.
So anytime you run out of people to sucker into this, let me know, and I will gladly volunteer my services. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, great, man. I know the site's going to love this one, and really do appreciate you being on. And I think you mentioned that you're going to drop some videos and things in the comments. This should post Wednesday morning for those of you that are listening and watching. Wednesday morning, and at some point Big John will come in and drop some links and videos. I might try to put some stats and stuff up too when I edit it and send it out.
Yeah, I definitely think we have some really good video on the Ragic pick. We have really good video on Motz just on YouTube. And so there, I'll throw a couple links in there. I'll even kind of point to what part of those videos you want to look at, because the Motz ones, that's when I was like, I read the scouting reports and I tried to do it, and then I looked at the video, and I usually try to do that backwards because I don't want to be influenced by the scouting reports. But I was watching that video and I was just like, this guy's much better than what a lot of the scouting reports are giving him credit for. So
yeah. Well, again, thanks, man, and great
no problem.
job. And we'll hold you to everything you said. We'll hold you to everything you said for years. Whether you said it or not, we're all gonna, if Jerpy doesn't make it, it's all Big John's fault. So
yeah, I feel like Limitory doesn't make it, it's my fault too. So.
Right, it is. Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, seriously. But thanks, man, and we'll see you on the site tomorrow with those videos. And have a very wonderful week. Viva El Birdos. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.
Take care, Jason, man.
Yeah, see you, man.